Hello Summoners and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides Best Champion of Main, now on patch 11.24. The champions that we pick for these series are strong picks with high performance, but have low ban rates and are unlikely to be nerfed anytime soon. They are reliable picks for climbing and are worth investing your time in. We also have a series that covers the most broken contested picks in each role, so be sure that you're subbed to the channel so you don't miss out when we post these as well. We'll start off things with the top lane with Mundo. Without any direct changes to the madman himself, his win rate has recently spiked, reaching nearly 55% in Plat Plus games. When a champion is both high in win rate and as easy as Mundo, you're missing out on some free LP by not locking him in. The nice thing about Mundo is that he's both a huge meat shield and a pretty heavy damage threat, so you never have to worry about him not fitting into your team comp. Mundo is what people refer to as a stat check champion, meaning that there isn't much room for counterplay for your opponents. If you're strong enough, you'll simply run down anybody that you can land a cleaver on and bash their heads in. So just be sure not to int the laning phase and you'll be raking in that free LP. If you're tired of being stuck in your current elo, the first step to climbing is fixing your champion pool. That's why we make these videos, so you can go ahead and find the right champion or champs for you. After you decide on what you're going to play, you have to learn how to play it correctly. It can take many games to learn a new champion, but you don't have to spend days and weeks doing it alone. Our top tier coaches over at ProGuides.com can help you figure out exactly what you need to work on. They're available 24/7, so it's never a bad time to come try one out. I promise, there's at least one that specializes in exactly what you're looking for. These guys have spent years reaching the top of the ladder, so why wouldn't you want to steal all their solo queue tips and tricks? All you have to do is click that link in the description, and now let's get back into the video. The next top lane pick that we have is Shen. Shen is technically considered a tank, but you'll play him pretty much like a bruiser, using him as a side lane duelist. He has the fighting power to go toe-to-toe with even the strongest champions like Camille and Fiora, even in the mid to late game stages. Then of course you have his ultimate, which gives you a leg up on your opponent. Being able to teleport right onto an ally means that you're guaranteed to be right in the middle of the fight. Meanwhile, when the opponent matching you in the side lane wants to join, they have to hope that there's a ward somewhere close by to get them into the fray. The last top laner that we have is Trundle. Most people think of Trundle as an anti-tank champion, and while that is true, he isn't just limited to stealing the stats from beefy boys. Remember, Trundle's Q lets him steal AD from his targets, so he's also really good at fighting other bruisers. Add on a cheesy ignite and he can easily bully anyone that you lane up against. This usually results in a lead that rapidly snowballs and you become a side lane force that no one in the enemy team can answer. The build that we have is a pretty standard one, but feel free to substitute items when you see fit. For example, you can grab Blade of the Ruined King over Syrax if you're exclusively split pushing, and if you prefer more sustain, grab Ravenous over Titanic Hydra. Taking a look now at the jungle, the first pick that we have is Rammus. He may be one of League's oldest champions, but don't let his super basic kit fool you. He's able to keep up with and even outperform a lot of other modern champions in the jungle. Sometimes simple is just the best way to go. We all know that solo queue players are very prone to getting caught out and throwing games, and that just happens to be exactly what Rammus is good at. Just rev up his Q and chem tank and you're able to get onto anybody in sight. In teamfights, the typical Rammus move is just to go for the ADC, since you can pretty much just solo kill them as they're forced to auto against your W and your Thornmail, but don't just tunnel on that. Sometimes there's a mage or even a support that you need to lock down, so your team can go ahead and blow them up before they can impact the fight. Our second jungler is Zac. Out of all the tanks in the jungle, he's the one that applies the most pressure in the laning phase. He's one of the few junglers that can gank over walls using his elastic slingshot to bypass vision. But in the first few levels, this ability doesn't have much range, so don't think that you can just turbo gank like Rek'Sai or Elise. Spend the first bit of the game trying to farm up. Then once you have more points in your E, you can start turning up the heat, punishing opponents for even stepping up a little bit too far away from their turret. In teamfights, you'll focus on disrupting the backline as much as possible. And if you're really fed, you can even pick up a Demonic Embrace to be more of a damage threat. Our final jungle entry is Amumu, yet another tank that's doing pretty darn well lately. Out of all the tanks or even all the other champions that's played in the jungle, Amumu is the god of teamfighting. His ability to lock down the entire enemy team with a massive area of his ultimate can very well easily seal the deal in a late game 5v5. I've seen countless games won from behind because of the setup potential. All it takes is just waiting for your flash to be up and make sure that your team is ready to follow up. Just be sure to invest in a control ward so you can make sure that your opponents don't know where you're lying in wait. Now for the mid lane, our first pick that we have is Xerath. Xerath has always been a pretty safe pick, and when you're casting spells from across the screen, it's pretty hard for the opposing team to get onto you, but not very difficult to be into you. Because come on, if you watch ProGuides, I'm sure y'all are studs. His laning phase is nice and easy. Like any other Siege Mage champions, you'll farm up to the point where you can eventually one-shot waves with a single combo. After that, you'll constantly be pressuring your opponents from well outside their engage range. In the event that you can play against something like Fizz or Zed that can potentially close the gap, you can go Crown of the Shattered Queen to minimize the risk of you ever dying. Our second mid laner for today is Corki. Despite being a very scaling-oriented pick, Corki is by no means weak in the early game. He can at least go neutral in most lanes, and once you have just a little bit of AD, you can often start bullying whoever you're laning against. His package also gives you a huge amount of quasi-global pressure whenever it's up. Yeah, he's got a pretty huge package. Opponents will often be underestimating the tremendous load that it gives, so if you catch them even a step too far away from their turret, you can usually get a kill or two with a well-timed bot roam. Yeah, pick this champion if you're spontaneous and Corki. As the game progresses, you'll play like any other marksman. Even with the package up, you don't need to go for some crazy plays in fights. Just use his high damage output in the front-to-back team fights. The final mid pick that we have is Veigar. Veigar is yet another champion that most people would consider a scaling pick, but with the new Predator tech that we've been seeing, he's able to have a pretty big early game impact. You may not think a simple rune swap would be enough to have that much of an impact, but you'd be wrong. Veigar's roaming ability with Predator is absolutely insane. You just zoom on in, usually in the bot lane, and pop cage. Any immobile target is forced to flash. Since Predator is a much shorter cooldown than Flash, you're easily able to repeat gank and get a guaranteed kill the next time around. With a boost to his early game presence, you're much more able to easily make it to the mid game, where Veigar starts to spike tremendously. At that point, you just one-shot any squishy unlucky enough to be put in your baby cage. Moving things down to the bot lane, our first pick that we have for the carries is Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw has been in a super comfortable spot in the last several patches, and with a new lethal tempo, he's even better. Instead of playing around weird uptime that it had before, now, as long as the target is in range, you can keep pumping out that DPS. Kog'Maw's immobility can also make playing him a little bit scary, but honestly, he's not all that vulnerable. The combination of shield bow and his ability to itemize full tank items like Randuin's Omen allows you to easily survive dives from bruisers and assassins. The other marksman appearing in this video today is Xayah. Historically, Xayah has been a pretty nice mix between your hyper carry DPS and safety, with her ultimate allowing you to dodge any threat that comes at you. For the past few months, Xayah has been in a pretty rough spot. I personally liked playing her, but she's not nearly as good as any of the other hyper carries. But she's not in this video with her normal crit-based hyper carry build. This is Lethality Xayah. You basically just play her to bully out the lane opponent as hard as possible, maxing Q instead of your standard Emax. In teamfights, the majority of your damage won't be W-empowered autos, but rather you'll be playing to one-shot half the enemy team with your RQE combo. Like I said, I'm a pretty big Xayah fan, and I'm glad this lethality build has breathed some life into her so she's a viable pick. That being said, our question of the day today is, what are some off-meta sleeper builds that can make otherwise bad champions into viable picks? I am really interested to see your answers in the comments down below. The last champion for the bot lane carry role is Seraphine. Sometimes the best route to carrying is to not play a carry at all. With Seraphine, you're able to enable the rest of your team to win fights through the buffs and the CC that she provides. I know a typical ADC main is 70% ego and 30% tilt, but you probably don't want to play what is essentially a support. But honestly, hear me out. If all you do is complain about how ADCs just get ran over by every single mage, bruiser, assassin, and tank, then why not mix it up a little bit for yourself? It's not like you're incapable of doing damage. Seraphine does a pretty good amount of damage on her own, and you can even itemize to be more aggressive if you want. Now for the other half of the bot lane, we have our supports, starting off with Soraka. When I think of supports in video games in general, the first thing that comes to mind are healers. And out of all the supports in League of Legends, Soraka is definitely the top of the class in that department. Whether it's sustaining through poke during the Baron dance or keeping an ADC alive as 3 people jump on them, Soraka's ability to save lives is kind of insane. The nice thing about Soraka that puts her ahead of the other enchanters, for me at least, is that almost all of her power comes from her W, a basic ability. Most enchanters give menial buffs and shields via their basic abilities, but tend to rely on their long ultimate cooldowns to really save allies. But with Soraka, a few casts of W is enough to heal 2 allies all the way up to full HP, and that can be done in just a few seconds. The next support that we have is Janna. Whereas Soraka specializes in healing up low allies, Janna's job is to make sure that your teammates never take damage to begin with. This actually means that Janna has a pretty decent skill cap, contrary to the players out there that say Janna takes no skill. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are definitely Jannas that just sit back shielding the ADCs. But there's also Jannas that are proactive, using her W to constantly harass and making use of their Q and R to interrupt dashes and jumps to keep their carries safe, rather than just protecting their own KDA. If you learn to play Janna like that, you can actually have a pretty big impact on your games and use her to climb pretty easily. Finishing off our list, we have Ahri. This is a bit more of a fun pick, but for fun doesn't really mean troll. It's perfectly viable and honestly, it's even kind of strong. Other mages may do a better job at being impressive since they can generally have better poke than Ahri, but she's also kind of a safer pick. Say you're laning against Leona. If she hits her E, normally a squishy champion is screwed. But as Ahri, your charm halts Leona before she can finish up the dash. That way she can never follow up with her Q. Aside, Ahri's a lot more deadly when you can actually connect your spells on the enemy ADC. Go figure. Champions like Xerath and Vel'Koz definitely have more of an annoying poke, but when you land Ahri's Charm on a squishy target, you can easily 100-0 them as long as your ADC is in range to follow up. Out of lane, you'll primarily be playing to make picks. Obviously, you don't quite have the damage that mid lane Ahri would, so instead of looking for solo assassinations, work with a teammate to make picks with your ultimate and Everfrost. And that is our top 3 champions to main on 11.24. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure you sub to the channel so you never miss on our meta guides. And you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Trust me, it'll really pay off. Remember, let us know some sleeper builds that make bad champions into good ones down in the comments below, and they may even be featured. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below where you can discuss the league further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, good luck on the rift, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.